The sky was burning. Vashtal 4, once a thriving world of towering crystalline cities and vast green plains, now lay in ruins. Fire and smoke rose into the darkened sky as Kreth warships hovered above, unleashing destruction. The ground trembled with every impact as orbital bombardments carved deep craters into the land. The Xilari, a once proud species of scholars and diplomats, were now nothing more than prey in a hunt they could not escape. HFY stood on the shattered balcony of the Grand Council Tower, the tallest remaining structure in the capital city of Zorish. His silver-blue skin was smeared with ash and blood, his ornate robes tattered. Once a diplomat, he had been forced into the role of a warrior, though he knew it was a battle they could not win. His people were not soldiers. They were thinkers, explorers, builders. And now, they were dying. Supreme Commander, a voice crackled through his helmet comms. It was Tarinlok, one of the last remaining high-ranking officers. We've lost the outer defenses. The Kreth have breached the inner perimeter. We have no options left. Karish clenched his jaw. No options. No hope. No future. He turned his gaze skyward, watching as the massive Kreth flagship, a monstrous black leviathan with spiked hull plating, blotted out the sun. Its weapons glowed with malevolent energy, preparing for another devastating strike. His hands trembled as he activated the ancient communications array in the council chamber behind him. It was old technology, a relic from a forgotten war, capable of broadcasting a distress signal across the stars. The Xilari had never needed it. They had always believed in peace, in diplomacy, in reason. The Kreth did not believe in any of those things. Karish took a deep breath and began the transmission. His voice was raw, filled with desperation. This is Supreme Commander HFY of the Xilari Dominion. To any who can hear this message, we are under attack. The Kreth Dominion has launched a full-scale invasion. Our cities burn. Our people are being slaughtered. We have no weapons strong enough to stop them. We have no armies left to fight. Please, if there is anyone out there, help us. He ended the transmission and sank to his knees, staring at the cracked floor. Silence. The static hum of the comms filled the room, but no response came. The universe had abandoned them. Outside, a deafening explosion rocked the tower. The shield generators had failed. The city's last line of defense was gone. HFY, Tarinlok's voice shouted through the comms again. They've deployed ground troops. We have to evacuate. Karish forced himself to stand. There was nowhere left to run, but he would not let the Kreth see him kneel. He walked out onto the balcony again and saw them, the nightmare made real. The Kreth ground forces descended from their dropships like a swarm of locusts. They were not living beings, not in the way organic creatures were. They were warforms, monstrous machines of steel and bone, their bodies a grotesque fusion of technology and biology. Some walked on two legs, others crawled on mechanical limbs like spiders, their glowing red optics scanning the ruins for survivors. One of them, a towering Kreth juggernaut, raised its massive arm. Its weapon, a plasma cannon grafted into its very body, powered up with a high-pitched whine. It was aiming directly at the tower. Karish braced himself for the end. Then, something unexpected happened. A sharp beep echoed from the ancient communication console. A response. Static filled the chamber, then a voice. Gravelly, human, and filled with a cold, determined edge. This is the United Human Fleet. We received your distress signal. A pause. Then, we're coming. Hold the line. Karish's breath caught in his throat. Humanity, the youngest species in the known galaxy. They were barely considered a spacefaring civilization. The Kreth had ignored them, seeing them as insignificant. What could they possibly do against an armada that had wiped out entire empires? The Kreth juggernaut fired. Karish barely had time to dive for cover before the tower exploded around him. Shards of crystal and metal rained down as the upper levels collapsed in a blinding inferno. He landed hard on the cracked stone, his body aching from the impact. Through the smoke and flames, he saw his people fighting and dying in the streets. Sci-Fi warriors, armed with nothing more than outdated plasma rifles, stood their ground against the Kreth warforms. They fought valiantly, but it was not enough. Then the sky changed. Streaks of light tore through the upper atmosphere, moving faster than anything Karish had ever seen. The air shimmered and bent as objects decloaked, revealing sleek, angular warships of human design. The lead vessel, marked UHS Vengeance, was unlike anything that Sci-Fi had encountered before, black, armored, and bristling with weapons. The Kreth AA detected the human fleet immediately. Their warships turned, preparing to annihilate this new threat. The Kreth had crushed civilizations older and stronger than humanity. They expected an easy fight. They were wrong. The human fleet did not attack conventionally. They did not engage in the slow, calculated battles the Kreth were programmed to counter. Instead, they struck like predators, fast, brutal, and unpredictable. Karish watched in shock as the first human stealth bombers slipped past the Kreth defenses, dropping EMP torpedoes onto enemy ships. The Kreth's AI-driven fleet stuttered as their systems were disrupted, their formations breaking apart. Then came the human drop pods, hundreds of them, raining from the sky like meteorites. They slammed into the ground with deafening impact, and from the wreckage emerged soldiers in exosuits, their weapons gleaming under the crimson sky. One of them stood out, a towering human marine, his armor scratched and battle-worn. His visor retracted, revealing a scared face and cold, determined eyes. His name was Sergeant Rick Grim Calloway. He looked at the stunned Sci-Fi forces and smirked. "All right, boys," he said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's show these metal bastards what humanity can do." Then the battle truly began. The sky was filled with fire. Explosions rippled across the atmosphere as the Kreth warships turned their full attention toward the incoming human fleet. To the Sci-Fi on the ground, it seemed like a hopeless effort. The humans had arrived, yes, but their fleet was small. Compared to the massive Kreth armada, the human ships looked like tiny insects preparing to fight a storm. HFY, still bruised from the tower's collapse, struggled to his feet. He pressed a bloodied hand to his helmet, trying to clear his blurred vision. His people had begged for help, and now help had come, but not in the form of a great unstoppable force. Instead, it was a handful of human warships, outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had never lost. The Kreth AI responded immediately. Their warships, cold and calculating, shifted their formation, preparing to swat away the intruders. Thousands of auto-targeting weapons locked onto the approaching human vessels. In a matter of seconds, the Kreth fleet unleashed a storm of plasma fire, their cannons lighting up the void. Karish inhaled sharply. It was over before it even began. Except, it wasn't. The human ships vanished. For a heartbeat, the battlefield was silent. The Kreth weapons had nothing to hit. Their massive cannons fired into empty space where the human fleet had been moments ago. Then, without warning, the lead Kreth warship shuddered violently. Sparks exploded from its hull, and a chain reaction of detonations ripped through its structure. It had been hit, but no one had seen from where. Then the Sci-Fi saw it, a flicker of movement. The human ships were cloaked. They were using a technology the Kreth had no defense against. Unlike other species that relied on brute force, the humans had mastered stealth warfare. Their ships phased back into visibility for mere seconds, fired a barrage of precision railgun shots, and then disappeared again before the Kreth could retaliate. Karish's heart pounded. They're not fighting like an empire. They're fighting like predators. More explosions rocked the sky. A second Kreth warship split apart from the inside, its core detonating in a spectacular burst of energy. The human fleet was small, but it was cutting through the enemy like a scalpel. On the ground, the Kreth warforms hesitated. Their AI minds, so used to predictable battles, struggled to process this unexpected resistance. That hesitation was all the humans needed. With a deafening boom, the first wave of human drop pods slammed into the battlefield. Metal capsules crashed through the ruined city, embedding themselves deep in the rubble. The Kreth warforms turned toward the impact sites, their weapons primed. They expected their enemies to crawl out slowly, disoriented from the crash. But they didn't understand humans. With a hiss of pressurized gas, the pod doors exploded outward. And from the wreckage, armored figures charged out with terrifying speed. Sergeant Rick "Grim" Calloway landed hard, his boots smashing into the cracked pavement. His exosuit hissed as it adjusted to the gravity, servos whining as they powered up. Around him, his squad had already begun moving, weapons up, scanning the battlefield with precise, practiced discipline. "Move, move, move," Calloway barked, his voice like gravel. His Marines didn't hesitate. They fanned out instantly, their adaptive helmets locking onto targets, highlighting Kreth warforms in glowing red outlines. Within seconds, the streak was filled with the roar of gunfire. The Kreth reacted. Their warforms turned, their mechanical limbs shifting as they raised their weapons. Plasma bolts ripped through the air, scorching the ruins. But the humans were faster. A Marine in red armor, Private Jace Carter, dived into cover behind a collapsed wall, his railgun whining as it charged up. He popped up for half a second, fired, and a Kreth warform's head exploded in a shower of sparks and black metal. Another Marine, Lieutenant Harper, activated her tactical cloak, vanishing from sight. She reappeared behind a towering Kreth enforcer, slamming an electro blade straight into its core, twisting the knife before ripping it out. The warform collapsed, twitching violently before going still. The Kreth had never fought soldiers like this. They were unpredictable, using guerrilla tactics, stealth, and sheer human aggression to counter an enemy that had always relied on superior firepower. HFY watched, stunned, as the battle unfolded. His people had fought bravely, but the Xilari had never stood a chance. Their tactics had been too orderly, too predictable. The humans, they fought like they had nothing to lose. A Kreth juggernaut stomped forward, its massive frame casting a shadow over the battlefield. It was built for annihilation, its heavy plating nearly impervious to energy-based weapons. It lifted its massive arm, preparing to fire its anti-personnel cannons, capable of wiping out an entire platoon in a single shot. Before it could fire, a human dropship roared in from above. The UHS Wraith, a sleek, black aircraft, descended at breakneck speed, dodging Kreth anti-air defenses with impossible precision. And then, from its open hatch, a single Marine leaped out. Sergeant Calloway dropped directly onto the Kreth juggernaut's back, his boots mag-locking to the armor. Before the massive warform could react, Calloway pulled a plasma charge from his belt and slammed it into the juggernaut's core. "Bite this, tin can." He jumped off, rolling as he hit the ground. A second later, the plasma charge detonated. The juggernaut exploded from the inside out, its entire frame collapsing as fire and shrapnel rained down. Calloway stood, exhaling hard. His radio crackled. "Sergeant, reinforcements inbound," came Captain Kane's voice from the command ship. "More Kreth dropships are en route." Calloway glanced up. Dozens of new Kreth ships were descending from the mothership, preparing to flood the battlefield with even more warforms. He spat on the ground, rolling his shoulders. "Good," he growled. "I was getting bored." And then, with his Marines beside him, he charged straight into the chaos once more. The ground shook as the Kreth reinforcements descended. Dozens of massive dropships roared through the burning sky, their metallic hulls gleaming in the firelight. From their bellies, hundreds of Kreth warforms deployed, marching in perfect, mechanical synchronization. Their glowing red optics scanned the battlefield, assessing the humans, calculating the most efficient way to exterminate them. Sergeant Rick Grim Calloway reloaded his rifle, his exosuit humming as it adjusted to his movements. He stood atop a collapsed building, surveying the battlefield below. His Marines had made a dent in the Kreth forces, but this was the real fight. The Kreth weren't holding back anymore. His comms crackled. Captain Kane's voice came through, steady but urgent. "Calloway, we're detecting heavy artillery signatures. The Kreth are deploying siege walkers. You need to move now." Calloway gritted his teeth. Siege walkers. Great. He switched his comms to his squad frequency. "All right, listen up. The metal bastards just called in the big guns. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and..." A massive explosion rocked the battlefield, sending debris flying. Calloway didn't even flinch. He exhaled slowly before finishing. "And I wouldn't want it any other way." The Marines chuckled, their battle-hardened nerves steady. They were ready. The Kreth attack began. Warforms charged forward, their mechanical limbs propelling them at terrifying speeds. Plasma bolts filled the air, scorching the ground, melting stone and steel alike. The auxiliary defenders, though battered and broken, held their ground alongside the humans. But the Kreth weren't just sending in foot soldiers. The siege walkers arrived. Towering, four-legged machines, each one a mobile fortress of destruction. Their bodies were covered in thick, reinforced plating, and their primary cannons, long-range plasma annihilators, could reduce entire city blocks to ash. One of them locked onto the human front lines. Its massive cannon whined as it powered up, preparing to unleash a blast capable of wiping out half of Calloway's forces. Calloway didn't hesitate. "Lieutenant Harper, take your team and hit those walkers. Carter, I want heavy fire on their flank. The rest of you, hold the damn line." The battlefield erupted into chaos. Harper and her strike team activated their tactical cloaks, vanishing from sight. They weaved through the wreckage, moving unseen as they approached the nearest siege walker. The Kreth warforms couldn't detect them, their targeting systems failing to lock onto their invisible forms. Then, Harper struck. She leaped onto the siege walker's leg, planting a detonator before vanishing again. More Marines followed, attaching charges to its joints and weak points. Seconds later, boom! The walker staggered, its right leg shattering in a fiery explosion. It collapsed onto its side, its main cannon twisting away from its target. Before it could recover, Harper uncloaked on top of it, driving a plasma blade deep into its exposed core. The walker detonated, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. But there were more. On the ground, Private Carter and his team laid down suppressive fire, their railguns tearing through Kreth foot soldiers. The Kreth had stronger armor, but human precision made up for it. The Marines aimed for joints, weak spots, exposed circuits. They didn't waste bullets. Carter ducked behind cover as a Kreth enforcer, a heavily armored warform, twice the size of a human, charged at him, its massive plasma blade swinging in a deadly arc. Too slow. Carter sidestepped, twisted his rifle to full power, and fired point-blank into the enforcer's exposed neck. The shot burned straight through, severing its head. The warform collapsed, sparks flying from its ruined circuits. But the Kreth kept coming. They didn't retreat. They didn't break formation. They kept marching forward, their AI minds cold and unyielding. They adapted. They calculated. They pushed harder. And that's when Calloway saw it. A new Kreth unit, one they hadn't faced before. A prime executioner. It stood at the center of the battlefield, taller than any other Kreth warform. Its body was sleek, covered in dark obsidian armor. Its arms ended in blades of pure plasma, and its optics glowed a deep, burning red. Calloway barely had time to react before it moved. It vanished in a blink, a blur of motion faster than any human had ever seen. Then, it was among them. A Marine screamed as the executioner cut straight through his armor, slicing him in half. Another tried to fire, but the warform dodged mid-motion, twisting unnaturally before driving its blade into his chest. Calloway rushed forward, raising his rifle. The executioner turned toward him, its red optics locking on. And then, it charged. Calloway barely dodged, rolling aside as the plasma blade sliced through the air where his head had been. He fired at point-blank range, but the executioner deflected the shots, moving impossibly fast. The warform lunged again, and Calloway knew he wouldn't dodge in time. Then, Harper tackled him out of the way. The plasma blade sliced across her side, and she gritted her teeth, refusing to scream. Calloway landed hard, scrambling up as the executioner raised its weapon for a final strike. But before it could finish the job, a railgun shot blasted straight through its skull. The executioner froze, its optics flickering. Then, it collapsed, twitching, before finally going still. Calloway turned to see Carter lowering his rifle, smoke still rising from the barrel. "Damn thing was fast," Carter muttered, "but not fast enough." Calloway grinned, breathing hard. He looked around. The battle was still raging, but the tide was shifting. The Kreth had lost their momentum. Their siege units were falling, their warforms struggling to keep up with human unpredictability. And in the sky above, the human fleet was winning. The Kreth's massive warships were failing against the human hit-and-run tactics. Their AI minds couldn't outmaneuver cloaked, highly mobile human strike teams. They were losing ships, their formations collapsing. Captain Kane's voice came through the comms. "Sergeant, the Kreth flagship is pulling back. They're retreating." Calloway exhaled. Then he laughed, a deep, relieved sound. "We did it," Harper whispered, clutching her injured side. "We actually did it." Calloway looked around at the battlefield, at his Marines, at the auxiliary survivors. They had done more than survive. They had won. Against all odds, against the might of the Kreth Dominion, humanity had won its first battle. And now, the Kreth knew the truth. Humans were not prey. They were predators. The battlefield was silent now. The gunfire had stopped. The Kreth were gone. All that remained was the aftermath, the wreckage, the bodies, and the weight pressing down on every soldier's chest. Sergeant Rick Calloway stood amid the ruins, his rifle hanging loosely by his side. The air was thick with smoke, the scent of burning metal and scorched flesh. The sky, once lit by the chaos of war, was now a dull gray, the embers of destruction flickering like dying stars. His Marines moved through the wreckage, searching for survivors, checking the fallen. But Calloway already knew what they would find. Too many were gone. He heard a choked gasp nearby and turned. Private Carter was kneeling beside a body, his hands shaking. It was Harper. She lay still, her exosuit scorched and torn, deep gashes across her side where the executioner's blade had struck. Blood pooled beneath her, seeping into the dirt. Carter placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. "Come on, Harper. You made it through worse. Just hold on." She didn't respond. Calloway walked over, kneeling beside them. He reached out, pressing his fingers against her neck. No pulse. Carter's breath hitched. His fingers curled into fists. No, damn it. He slammed his fist against the ground, his whole body shaking. Calloway closed his eyes for a brief moment, exhaling slowly. Then he reached for Harper's dog tags, unclipping them from her suit. He held them in his palm, the metal still warm. "She saved my life," he said quietly. She knew what it would cost. Carter wiped his face with the back of his hand. His jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might break. She shouldn't have had to. No one should have had to. All around them, the cost of war was laid bare. Silari civilians huddled near the ruins, their faces hollow with grief. Parents clutching their children. Wounded soldiers trying to comfort each other, despite their own pain. The bodies of humans, and Silari alike, scattered across the ground like broken dolls. Calloway watched as a Silari mother cradled her son's lifeless body, whispering something in their native tongue. The words were soft, mournful, filled with a sorrow that needed no translation. The war had been necessary, but that didn't make it any less cruel. Captain Kane's voice came through the comms, steady but heavy. "Sergeant, we're finishing the cleanup. The fleet's confirming Kreth movements. Looks like they're pulling back for now." For now. Calloway knew better than to hope this was over. He tapped his comm. "Understood. We're securing the area. Lost some good people down here." A pause. Then Kane's voice, quieter this time. "I know." Calloway sighed, standing up. His body ached, exhaustion pressing down on him like a weight too heavy to bear. But he couldn't stop. Not yet. He turned to Carter. "Help gather the fallen. We take everyone home." Carter hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He wiped his eyes again and stood. The Marines moved with grim determination, retrieving their fallen brothers and sisters. They had fought like hell together. They would not leave each other behind. Calloway walked through the wreckage, Harper's dog tags still clutched in his hand. His grip tightened as he looked around at the devastation. The Kreth had called them weak. The Kreth had thought humans would break. Instead, they had fought. They had bled. And they had won. But the victory felt hollow. Because no matter how many battles they won, war always took something away. As the first dropships arrived to retrieve them, Calloway looked up at the darkened sky and whispered, "Was it worth it?" He didn't have an answer. The human fleet hung in the void, silent and waiting. The Kreth mothership loomed ahead, a massive obsidian fortress, its angular hull pulsing with eerie red light. This was the heart of the invasion, the command center from which the Kreth had launched their assault on Xilari, and humanity had one chance to take it down. Sergeant Rick Calloway gripped the harness inside the dropship, his heart pounding as he stared at the mothership through the viewport. He had fought battles before, faced overwhelming odds, but this mission was different. This wasn't about survival. This was about ending the war. The plan was simple, at least on paper. A small infiltration team would breach the mothership's outer defenses, plant a fusion warhead at its reactor core, and get out before detonation. The Kreth's AI-driven fleet relied on centralized command systems. If they lost the mothership, their entire war machine would be thrown into disarray. It was a suicide mission. But Calloway and his Marines weren't the kind to back down. The dropship shuddered as it approached the Kreth vessel, its stealth plating keeping it hidden from enemy sensors. Beside Calloway, Carter checked his weapons, his jaw clenched. The loss of Harper still weighed on him, but he was here, because she would have been. Captain Kane's voice came through the comms. "You're 5 clicks from the insertion point. Once inside, you'll have 20 minutes before they detect you. Get it done." Calloway exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "Copy that." The dropship reached the hull, magnetic clamps latching onto the smooth alien metal. The hatch hissed open, and Calloway's team moved out, their boots silent in the vacuum. The Kreth had no need for airlocks. Their warforms didn't breathe. But that also meant they didn't expect intruders who did. Calloway attached a breaching charge to the outer panel. A few seconds later, boom! The metal split apart, and the Marines slipped inside the belly of the beast. The corridor was dimly lit, illuminated by pulsing red veins of energy running through the walls. The air was cold, sterile, too clean, too unnatural. The Kreth ship felt more like a living machine than a vessel. They moved fast, weapons ready. Every step deeper into the ship was a step closer to death, and they all knew it. Then, movement ahead. A group of Kreth warforms patrolled the corridor, their sleek bodies gliding noiselessly. Their red optics flickered as they scanned for threats. Calloway gave the signal. The Marines activated their cloaks, blending into the shadows. The Kreth patrol passed by, unaware of the humans lurking inches away. One mistake, and they were dead. They reached the reactor chamber. The room was vast, a cathedral of power, its core pulsing like a giant artificial heart. Massive conduits channeled raw energy, feeding the Kreth war machine. This was their lifeblood, and humanity was about to rip it out. Carter moved forward, setting the fusion warhead against the central conduit. His fingers worked quickly, arming the device. The countdown began. Then, an alarm screamed through the ship. The Kreth knew they were here. Calloway turned as the doors burst open. Warforms poured in, plasma weapons charging. The Marines opened fire, their rifles spitting molten rounds. The battle exploded in close quarters. Bullets tore through Kreth exoskeletons, sparks and fluid spraying across the floor. Plasma bolts seared through the air, melting metal, burning flesh. Carter finished arming the bomb. 5 minutes. We need to move. Go, Calloway barked, covering their retreat. A Kreth enforcer lunged at him, its massive blade swinging down. Calloway dodged, firing point-blank into its exposed circuits. The warform convulsed before collapsing. They ran. The ship shook as the reactor destabilized. Kreth warforms emerged from the walls, adapting to the humans' movements. They didn't retreat. They didn't hesitate. They only calculated the fastest way to eliminate the intruders. Carter was hit. A plasma bolt tore through his side, and he stumbled, blood spilling onto the floor. Calloway grabbed him, hauling him up. I got you. Stay with me. The exit was in sight. One last sprint. One last fight. Calloway turned, firing his last rounds into the approaching Kreth. The dropship's hatch opened, and the team leaped inside just as the warhead detonated. A blinding explosion tore through the mothership, its core ripping apart in a chain reaction of fire and energy. The Kreth vessel split open, its structure collapsing in on itself. The dropship escaped the inferno, racing away as the mothership vanished in a blinding supernova of destruction. The human fleet watched in silence as the heart of the Kreth invasion was annihilated. Calloway slumped back against the bulkhead, breathing hard. Carter groaned, clutching his side. But he was alive. They had done it. The war wasn't over. But tonight, humanity had delivered its answer. And the Kreth would never forget it. The battlefield was silent. The war was over. Sergeant Rick Calloway stood on the bridge of the UHF Resolute, staring at the wreckage floating in the cold abyss of space. The Kreth mothership was gone, obliterated in a brilliant explosion that had torn through its core. Without their command center, the remaining Kreth warforms had gone dormant, their fleet scattering like a swarm without a queen. Humanity had won. The weight of it pressed down on Calloway's chest. They had done the impossible. Against a technologically superior enemy, against overwhelming odds, they had fought, endured, and prevailed. But the cost was high. The fleet's medical bay was overflowing with the wounded. Carter was among them, resting on a cot with a fresh bandage wrapped around his side. He had barely survived the last mission, but he was still breathing. That was more than many could say. Calloway gripped Harper's dog tags in his fist. She should have been here. So many should have been here. But war never let you keep everyone you loved. Captain Kane's voice cut through the silence. Sergeant, you might want to see this. Calloway turned, stepping toward the holotable. The display flickered to life, showing real-time scans of the Xilari homeworld. The Kreth ships were retreating, fleeing. For the first time since the invasion began, Xilari's skies were clear. The bombardments had stopped. The people were emerging from the ruins. Cheers erupted across the bridge as the realization settled in. They had freed an entire world. Calloway exhaled slowly. This was what they had fought for. Kane turned to him, arms crossed. Fleet Command is requesting a message. They want you to address the soldiers. Calloway frowned. Me. You led them through this fight. They'll want to hear from you. He hesitated. He wasn't a politician, wasn't a general. He was just a soldier who had done what needed to be done. But as he looked around the bridge, he saw the faces of those who had fought beside him, who had bled and lost and sacrificed. They needed to hear this. He stepped toward the terminal, tapping into the fleet-wide channel. His voice would be broadcasted to every surviving soldier, every ship, every outpost still holding the line. He took a deep breath. "This is Sergeant Calloway." A pause. He didn't need fancy words. He just needed the truth. "We did it." Silence followed, then a roar of cheers, of voices shouting in victory. Calloway let them have their moment before continuing. "The Kreth thought we were weak. They thought they could break us, wipe us out like we were nothing. But they were wrong." He clenched his fist. "They underestimated the one thing that makes us different from them. We don't give up. We don't stop fighting. Not when our people are in danger, not when our homes are under attack, and not when our allies call for help." His voice hardened. "We paid a price for this victory. We lost friends, brothers, sisters. We honor them by remembering what they stood for." His grip tightened on Harper's dog tags. "This war isn't over. The Kreth will come back. But when they do, they'll know one thing." He exhaled. "Humanity doesn't run. We don't kneel. And we sure as hell don't lose." The bridge erupted into cheers once more, but Calloway simply stepped back, letting the others celebrate. The HFY sent their own message of gratitude, their leaders bowing their heads in thanks. For the first time in history, humanity had fought not for itself, but for another species. And they had won. Days later, the fleet prepared to leave. The HFY would rebuild. The Kreth would regroup. But humanity had earned its place among the stars. As Calloway stepped onto the transport, he looked one last time at the planet below. This was just the beginning. Humanity's legacy had begun.